Welcome to our show today. The world is busy finding a cure for the deadly virus that has targeted the economies of the rich and poor nation. But China and India are right now stuck in a face to face war like situation at a location which is not even inhabitable. So, if you actually look at the altercation at the line of control, there are all kinds of theories that are floating around. One of the theories is whether India's vote at the WHO, which basically asked for an investigation against China, is that one of the reasons that China is now pushing at the border? The second theory is that India has been building a road right along the LAC. Is that one of the reasons that China is now getting antsy and is trying to push India back? The third theory is whether China really is realizing that it has to support Pakistan in the long term. So it continues to push India from one side while Pakistan pushes India from the other, and India finds itself boxed in the northern areas. Then there is the fourth theory, which says India realizes that China is at its weakest position right now. The world is against China for COVID to start with. Beyond that, uh, everybody realizes, and India realizes, that the line of actual control is a problematic one, and India has been looking to expand that line of control for a long time, and to freezing on that line of control, and figuring out what the dispute is. But China doesn't want to have a discussion around the line of actual control, and so will India and China be able to post reaching that conflict point, be able to sit down and finally say, all right, let's figure out where our line of control is. India in the last few years has also sorted out its issues with Bangladesh, for example. It's been able to completely figure out its boundaries. It gave a little bit of land to Bangladesh and said, all right, we are a sorted border now. So, is India looking at that situation? The last one being Kashmir. The BJP government is able to sort out Kashmir, so to say. And don't want to say it's sorted out because it's not really sorted out, but they have a solution which many Indians wanted for a long time. Uh, they were able to do things which nobody else was able to do. So, is this LAC finalization? Is it part of that same long-term plan to sort out the LAC, sort out Kashmir, and making sure that all disputes we can go beyond? But Kashmir, as we see, is not settled. Well, LAC is not settled. Well, I'm Rohit Gandhi, and thank you for joining me for this show at Democracy News Live. Wars and military disputes are never easy. It's a lot of smokes and mirrors. It's about morale. It's about troop morale. And what we realize is that this has been going on for a long time now. Uh, the Indian forces and the Chinese forces have, come eyeball to eyeball. They've stood there. They've pushed each other around. Uh, but this last altercation at the Galwan Valley, where both forces obviously seem to have struggled with each other, and 20 Indian soldiers lost their lives. There is no word from the Chinese in terms of how many Chinese soldiers lost their lives, but China does not usually agree and never really announces how many soldiers will lose their life. Well, is there a video for an altercation like this? There always is a video. When China and the Indian troops come eyeball to eyeball, or they come into an altercation, there is always recording going on. So we know there is video recording on both sides. Nobody's going to release it, but the reality is there is video. So we, on both the Indian and the Pakistani side, know what the casualties will be. So the Indians are claiming a certain number, which is at 43 casualties. China is not talking about it. In fact, it's at first even
line of action.
conflict is going. But usually, when a conflict takes place, this is the kind of videos we usually see, which show the kind of altercation that takes place. Let's take a look at this video. This is from a couple of years ago now, when Indian and Chinese troops kind of begin fighting with each other on the borders.
The Galvan Valley. China has not released in the Galvan Valley. China has not released any information on casualties. To better understand this incident, we need to go back to 1962. China and India went to war over the disputed border that ended with an uneasy truce. The disputed area lies amid remote jagged mountains on the northern tip of India, near the Aksai Chin Plateau, which is claimed by India but occupied by China. India asserted that the region, which is slightly larger than Portugal, belonged to the Indian-controlled portion of Kashmir, and China said it was part of the region of Xinjiang. The war lasted just 1 month, but killed almost 1,400 Indian troops and more than 7.
Well, that's where Galwan is, and that's the conflict. We were playing out a tape to give you a little sense of what is happening there on the ground and how the historical conflict is. But let's look at the video of when India and Chinese troops meet at the border, the kind of fighting that happens. This is a video from a few years ago. Let's take a look. There was a lot of fighting here that took place. They pushed each other around. They always record these videos and they push them out. So we certainly know that there is video of the fight that happened between them.
Chinese troops.
All right, guys,
In
come
the
back.
end, China gained control of the Aksai Chin region.
So the video, what's happening at the moment right now? China has an aggressive troop buildup. They have about 6,000 soldiers. There's a whole brigade out there with its support at 4 locations near eastern Ladakh, 3 in Galwan Valley and 1 near Pangong Lake. On the Indian side has also moved up as many troops as possible, a lot of equipment to handle the war. Now, who all can take part in this conflict? First of all, India and China will possibly come head on with each other if things go that route. Will the Pakistanis join this? It probably will be a bad idea for China if Pakistan joins it, because if as soon as the Pakistanis join, the will have every right to come into this conflict. Now, left are the Russians. The Russians have been slowly supplying India a lot of the equipment. So the Russians are unlikely to even enter a war situation like this. They will be quiet on the back end. They'll continue supporting it. In fact, plays into Russia. Russia does not want 2 powers in its region. It wants to be the only superpower. So with an India-China conflict, Russia certainly will come out up ahead. So it works for Russia, a conflict like this. Now, how do we move forward? What happens? Will there be a full-scale war? Is something that we have to look at. So let's bring in our 2 guests today. We have Major General Astana. He's the chief instructor at the USI in India, based in New Delhi. And we have Dr. Tej Pratap Singh. He's the professor at the Department of Political Science at Banaras Hindu University. Thank you guys for joining us for this show today. Let me start by asking you, General Astana, where do you see this conflict going? This is not the first time there's been an altercation, but an altercation of this scale does not happen on a daily basis.
Certainly, this is neither the first time nor the last time when a standoff has taken place, because so the line of actual control remains undemarked, and so long the delineation and the entire exercise is not complete, there will be different perceptions of line of actual control, and in certain areas the perceptions, and wherever they overlap, the troops patrol. When they patrol, then it is called as transgression, and when they come and sit down with their tentage and with their bunkers and for a longer haul and for the longer time, obviously the other side also does the same, and when that happens, then it is a standoff. So this is neither the first one nor the last one, but certainly this is not one of those standoffs which have happened earlier, because the national sentiments, they have picked up much than what it was earlier, more so because after a long quiet period of almost no firing on the borders, this time, although there has been no but Chinese have actually broken all the confidence building measures, taken the improvised weaponry in the form of those rods along with things like that, and they have started using some unethical ways which the professional armies don't use. So therefore, there was a fight to start with, and thereafter our people, our soldiers, brave they are, and with their entire professionalism, they responded, and they are also trained in unarmed combat. So there are fair casualties on the Chinese side. But difference between the two countries. In our country, the braves are honored, and once they the supreme sacrifice, everybody in the country salutes them and honors them. Whereas in China, it is just a number which goes into the and those numbers they would never declare. Simple reason, because CCP regime is in its worst of days as of today, and therefore do not want a internal anger to come up against themselves, and that is one of the reasons why they are hesitating in declaring these casualties. They didn't declare. We don't expect that they will declare during this period as well. But now the problem is, our basic position is that they must go back to the pre-standoff position. That's the basic position which India would like to see.
So,
And unless that happens, we are certainly for a exciting time in a manner that both sides will continue to do posturing, and this posturing will continue till the time we actually see what I have indicated.
let me bring in Dr. Tej here. Dr. Tej, the present standoff politically, where does this stand historically? We've seen altercations in the past for many decades now. There has been an eyeball to eyeball situation. But when you look at this situation today, how do you see this unfolding? There is an audio issue. I can't hear him. There is an audio issue, so we'll go back to talking to General Astana until we fix that audio. So give me a sense in terms of, if the war unfolds and if both these countries begin fighting, how long, in your estimate, can a war between these two countries last?
Firstly, in all probabilities, the war should not break out. The war is not in the interest of either of the countries, and countries realize. Both countries are also nuclear powers. There is another angle which we must take into account, that in the escalation dynamic, once you climb one step, it's very difficult to control the escalation dynamics, because it is not in your hand, it is in two parties thereafter. So it's a counter move and counter move. Secondly, today, while India faces China, it is also a signal to the entire world, and the entire is looking to towards India, because we are facing the dragon with expansionist design, not only on Ladakh area, but also in many other areas, which includes Indo-Pacific. So people are watching us very carefully. The kind of adventurism which China has done in Indo-Pacific, in South China Sea, in East China Sea, etc., find that after India has taken a stand, you find ASEAN also making to say that no, we want to go back to UNCLOS 2. We don't honor the COC, and similarly similarly there are other issues which come into play. The whole world is also looking at it. After Corona, there is a war against China, and once saw that global anger, people didn't react immediately, because there was a supply chain in place, and people wanted to treat their patients. That was the first priority. So global anger was not being shown to that extent. But now the situation has changed. And the situation is that we have a problem at hand that people are looking at rebutting China's adventurism in all forums. China did the adventurism on the posturing military at various places. They also went on to the economic front in a manner, started a health silk road in a manner that they started profiteering out of the medicine supply and out of the health chain. You have heard the example of the faulty kits being said and after taking the money in advance and things like that. Now that has also not been liked by the. So there have been a number of occasions where China has been seen in very poor light, and it is also
So
being
do
seen
you
that
think
China
so?
is using.
So
Yeah.
do you think India is taking advantage of a poor situation of China and then saying this is a good opportunity to solve the line of actual control issue?
No, it's the other way around. China is trying to a better advantage of India for the reason because in China's perception, they have crossed over the peak of coronavirus. They thought that India is now picking up, and this is an opportunity that if they walk into Galwan, maybe that India may not be India may not be able to react. So under circumstances, they try to do some in a manner that uh, sorry, I think there is some call coming up. So they try to make an advantage this situation, and that situation they thought that if they walk into Galwan, they will be able to walk the threat to uh, sorry they will be able to sort out the threat to their national highway, that is the Western Highway, because between Galwan Heights and the highway there is much of the area is plain. If you are able to secure these heights, which they are trying to secure, they will be able to secure their Karakoram Pass, their Western Highway, and the CPN, which goes into Pakistan. So there was a strategic aim of China to come into this area, and they have been claiming this area by virtue of what they say. We gave you line of actual control format in 1959, and in 1962 also we came to Galwan. Whereas as far as India is concerned, our stand is very clear. The entire Akshay chain was part of Maharaja Harit Singh's Riyasat. Maharaja Harit Singh acceded to us, so the entire region belongs to us, number one. And number two, we treat the Johnson line in Ladakh as the border. So therefore, that also gives us some kind of, shall we say, legality as to why Akshay chain is. As far as
So
China is
let's
concerned,
hang on
that
one
kind of
second.
legality.
Can we just take a look at the map now that you're talking
Yeah.
about it? If you can bring up the map full screen so that we can see what the line looks like. So there is considers as the line where the area of Aksai Chin, which was handed over to the Chinese by the Pakistanis,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
treat that line as the line of actual control. In India's case, if you actually take a look, if you go ahead and show us that map where we see the line which India considers as the line of actual control. Um, there's a more detailed map that we have. We can go into that map where
Yeah.
you will see that the highway that the Chinese have built is built with a red line. And then there is a road that the
Yeah.
Indians have been working on, and the road and a bridge which Indians
is
have been
under
working
China.
on, which goes all the way from Galwan, and it goes all the way up. Basically, it goes across the line of actual control, which India thinks. And that's where a lot of the challenge is coming in. The Chinese are looking at that road going through. You're trying to establish your LSE. We are still in dispute, and we should have a discussion. But on the Chinese side, they've already built the highways. And India obviously didn't protest enough when they were building the highways. That's why they could do it. Otherwise, if India had launched an action that time, it wouldn't have reached that point. But now that the Indians are building on this side of the line of actual control, we are seeing the issue. We have a slightly more detailed map of, if you can go ahead and show us that map, where the two roads are. One is that big highway, which is so this is the road that the Indians have been building from all the way from Shylock coming all the way in and then going back up north. On the Chinese side, if you see where that road is, it's slightly already beyond. So this is the line of actual, as it called, occupation, but line of actual control, which the Chinese think is the border. And the yellow line is what the Indians think is the border. So I think that's where one of the challenge lies, and the road, because it goes right through it, is where the issue lies. Now, this road, that the blue line that we are seeing right now, is where a lot of the challenge is also taking place, because this is a road. This is the valley where India and China both basically had the guy with the fist fight this time. So uh, if you see how close those roads are, and how the altercation on building of this road is taking place, so we have to realize, what is this fight really about? Is this about making sure that they both can coexist peacefully, or will they continue now, with pushing the envelope and saying, "That's my road. This is my road." It's an uninhabitable piece of land. Long term, there may be access to Pakistan, but the Karakoram highway access is already existent to go to China from Pakistan. I've been on that road, and the amount of effort they put into building that road is tremendous. Now they already have that road. Now, if they're continuing to push India on this side and not sit down and actually have a discussion, it seems a pretty futile attempt of having international relations. You want peace for development. You don't want an ongoing battle. I think Dr. Tej has just joined us as well. I'll let Dr. Tej come in. Dr. Tej, from your perspective, this whole fiasco that's taken place, what is your perspective on it? I can't hear Dr. Tej. I can't hear Dr. Tej, so I think we'll have to let go of Dr. Tej. So, General Asthana, please explain to the viewers who are looking at it, is it at all connected with India's construction of that road, or is it entirely a one-off incident which has taken place?
No, in fact, in the beginning of the program, you gave out 4 or 5 theories. It's a mix of all of them, and in to that you add this connection part of it, the road connection part of it. Now, what has happened is China had already developed infrastructure up to the line of actual control. When we started doing it, China is quite irked about it. I would say they are quite rattled about it. The second issue is that so long we were constructing the road, DSDBO road, till much of reaction came from Chinese. The problem started once we constructing the Galwan road. Now, in that Galwan road, what China thought was that in case go and occupy the heights of Galwan, then movement towards their highway will be much easier. And combine that certain statements which came after Balakot, when we were talking about taking and things like that. Now it appeared that perhaps India is quite serious about it, and it could also be an apprehension that they must have thought that perhaps their highways are threatened. So that could be one of the reasons, in addition to all of this which we mentioned, that China wanted to make the best use of the opportunity when India was struggling with COVID. So these are some of the, I think it's a collection of all these reasons. And one thing I want to say, you have shown the map. Now, this Saxgram Valley actually to China, which was a big blow to us for the reason because had what happened, we had a direct land connection to Afghanistan, whereas China had no border with Pakistan. Now, this ceding was a strategic disadvantage to us. That is number one. And secondly, this they gave us, there is another line called as McDonald-Courtney line. So they took that line as a basis of ceding that territory. Whereas the problem which is coming up is that when it suits China, they say we honor no territory or no territorial agreement between British India and Tibet because I took over Tibet. When it suits them, then they go 1890 treaty. Like in Doklam, they went to 1890 treaty because they thought that it is suiting them.
Right,
They
right.
keep changing
Dr.
their
Tej, is
stance
Dr.
as
Tej,
it
is
is
audio up back in now? Dr. Tej, is your audio working? Okay.
Can you hear me?
I hope
Can
तो
you
अभी
can you
बात
hear
करता
me?
हूँ
Dr.
अभी मैं 2 मिनट में आ रहा हूँ
Janlasthana
आपके प्रोग्राम पे तब तक
and
डिस्टर्ब मत
take
करो
off his screen because his audio is.
Can
Dr.
you hear me,
Asthana,
please?
Janlasthana, you need to go for another show, I guess, right?
yeah
Can
I have
can you
to I
hear
have
me,
to
please?
it doesn't matter
So I'll let you go, General Asthana. I'll
Yeah,
continue with. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Asthana, General Asthana, and Dr. Tej. Please let's continue chatting with you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Tej. Give me a sense in
yes,
terms
sir.
of from your perspective, a
Yeah,
political viewpoint, in terms of how this is
yes,
unfolding.
yeah,
Is this an unprecedented
yes, yeah.
situation?
Definitely, it is unprecedented. I hope that you are listening me.
Yes, I can.
Are you listening me? Yeah, it is unprecedented, no doubt. And one thing I want to tell you, Rohit, that this is not going to end into war. This China and India, they both know the consequences of war. So neither China nor India in favor of war. Both are just engaging into eyeball confrontation. In political science, we call it this chicken game in international relations, as it happened in the Cuban crisis, where neither Khrushchev nor Kennedy wanted to withdraw. So when eventually it was Khrushchev who blinked, and that crisis did not happen. The same kind of situation is unfolding here also. Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi both are testing the resolve of each other, and both know that they are not going to end into war. The reason they know the consequences there. And this China has been using the salami slicing strategy so well in the China Sea. They have succeeded in grabbing the Parcel Island. They have succeeded in grabbing the Spratly Island, and now they have entered in the Vietnam economic zone. Yeah. So they have started the oil exploration and drilling also there. So Deng Xiaoping, when he came into the power, then he said that China should conceal its strength and should wait for its opportune time. There was a thesis that China's rise is peaceful. It is not the like the rise of Germany, which led to the First World War and Second World War. So Chinese scholars and even some other non-Chinese scholars like Kishore Mahbubani and others, they were of this opinion that unlike other powers, right, China's rise is peaceful. And Mahbubani and the Chinese scholars pleaded that America and other powers should accommodate China's rise. But realism says that a rise of any power creates instability in the world order, world system. Yeah. So now the
So what you're
China's rise.
saying, Dr.
Yeah,
Tej, what you're saying is that they are just going to posture. They will not go for a war. What
definitely
if
they
they
will
do
not go
go?
for.
What if they do go for a war? Then
I'm
what is the situation going to be?
the session is that right now army is more experienced. Since 1979, that was the last war China fought with Vietnam. In fact, China wanted to teach a lesson to Vietnam, but China could not teach a lesson to Vietnam. In fact, Vietnam taught a lesson to China. China did not lose the war, but China did not win the war also. In fact, it was a kind of phase of loss for China. And since 1979, China has not fought any war. This is another matter. They have grabbed lot of territory without firing a shot. that we call it the salami slicing strategy. And that same strategy they were
What
following
if
here on the
India
Tibet
and
border as well.
China? What if India and China land up going to war?
Right, yeah, if they are going to the war, right now our Air Force is in far better condition than Chinese. As we all know, that our air weapons are much better than the Chinese, because Chinese is the indigenous thing and it has never been tested. So, and as far as our weapons are concerned, our weapons have been tested at many places here. So we have the air superiority. And so everybody knows this thing. As far as the number of soldiers is concerned, we are equally in the same numbers. And in the Galwan Valley incident also, when it happened, eventually it were the Indian soldiers. They were not armed, they were not prepared. But even then, without any preparation, the number of casualties, as it is being reported in the international media, some reports say that Chinese casualty has been higher than India. It can't be proved, but definitely there has been casualties. The thing is that when without any preparation, that Indian soldiers fought Chinese soldiers so well when they have come prepared with the improvised weapons. So and Indian army has been engaging. They have fought war, Kargil war, and many others war. They are fighting insurgency in Kashmir, etc. So on these basis, if war is happening in hypothetical situation, I'm 100% sure it is not going to happen. But even if it is
What if this
happening,
battle turns
Indian
into a nuclear war?
nuclear war, it will not happen. In the Kargil also, India was a nuclear weapon power. Pakistan was also a nuclear weapon power. Both were nuclear weapon power. There was a anxiety in the international community that both the countries are nuclear weapon power. So probably this Kargil war might end into the nuclear war. But nuclear war makes you a responsible actor in the international community. And both India and Pakistan, despite having the war in 1998, both exercised tremendous restraint and they did not go for use of nuclear weapons. Even Vajpayee
You have
also,
to
when Vajpayee was
remember
asked
that the Americans had great say on how Pakistan acted in the Kargil war. After it started, there was enough pressure by the Americans, but that American pressure does not work on the Chinese. And two, our scenario number two, if India and China go to war, do you think Pakistan will join the bandwagon?
Uh, yes, if China and India are the starting war, then definitely Pakistan will try to exploit the situations. In fact, the Pakistan want this thing to happen. So if India-China war is occurring, there is every possibility that Pakistan will enter into the war. And Bipin Rawat has said repeatedly, and many other generals have said repeatedly, that India is ready to fight to war. So we will not be surprised if Pakistan is also joining the war, and we have to
And
be
if
ready for that.
Pakistan joins the war, do you envisage other players in the war like this?
You see, number of countries joining the war, it doesn't affect. In fact, the decision of the battle depends upon the morale of the people and many other factors. Against Israel, all Arab countries joined the hands and they started war against Israel, but not once, but many times they lost war against Israel. So, number of countries joining the war is immaterial.
Well,
Uh,
I, I,
uh,
d-
yeah,
I think I disagree a bit, Dr. Tej, because if, let's say, Pakistan joins
yeah,
the battle and
yeah.
the Americans can easily punch in into a weapon war like this. If the Americans punch in because the Pakistanis and Chinese have joined hands and attack India, and the Americans for a long time, have been uh, pushing India, if I want to call it that, to continue being an altercation with China, then the Americans could actually launch an air attack, and that certainly can give massive superiority. There are B-52 bombers and the airborne support with the UAVs and their drone weapons. That could change the face of a war like this. The casualties that they can inflict could be very large, and what better situation than to have an India-China war going in, since it's become an international conflict with a third country joining in, the Americans to support its Indian partnership, come on in and begin bombing. Basically, China has lost its situation in the world. It will no longer be able to stand up again for a while to come. And the Russians will be smiling all the way home, saying, "Well, great, we don't have to deal with China anymore." This could turn out to be a war which could be very decisive for China and India, for that matter.
Yeah, these are the hypothetical situations. Firstly, as far as I think, the America will only provide the logistic support. America is not going to send its troops. America is not going to join it. As far as this Ladakh is concerned, they might join the war if it is happening in the Indian Ocean. But America sending its troops are sending its
True.
air forces.
Their support.
That possibility is very minimum, and America will provide the logistic support. America will provide moral material support, but America sort of sending its troop will do everything here. And I
No,
don't
it's
think
not
the
true.
American.
Um,
And even so far, we have not entered into any kind of. We out of 4 foundational agreement, India has signed 3 foundational agreement, except the basic exchange agreement. Other agreements they have signed. So they have this
right?
evolving strategic partnership. But America committing its troops for the defense of
Not true. So
India,
I'm
yeah,
talking Air Force. I'm talking Air Force. The B-52
yeah,
is
yeah.
certainly,
Yeah, they will be.
but it's
Its chances are remote. Chances are remote. I don't think their air force will participate directly in bombarding China.
or
So,
drones.
but the uh, drones, everything, but they will be providing to India. But I don't think their men will be coming here. This is my sense.
Now, looking at it
I
from
don't think
China's
that.
perspective, we are talking India's perspective on how India could gain. Looking at it from China's perspective, if China goes to war, how
Ch-
will it play out for China? How do you think it has enough material superiority? Do you think it has soldier
no, no,
superiority
no,
to actually infringe a lot of
no.
harm on India?
You see, the war is always won by the soldiers, their morale, their courage, not by the number of weapons. And even moreover, the Chinese weapons are the indigenous weapons here, and the Chinese weapons have not been tested here. So that is the main problem here. So even if war is happening, when China could not defeat a small country like Vietnam, then how can you think that China will be able to defeat a big country like India? Forget about 1962. 1962, the situation was different. But now 2020, now India has sufficient experience in the mountain warfare. After 1962, we have been preparing for the mountain warfare. So now things have changed. So it is no longer a cakewalk for China as it was in 1962. China knows this thing. And that is why you see now they have also started speaking in a different language. And now the Hong Kong issue has come, the Taiwan issue is coming up. So many issues are coming up. And I'm sure gradually the de-escalations will take place. And eventually already they were at military level, political level, diplomatic level, all 3 levels, the talks are going on. So I'm sure that ultimately some results will come out. India has to be ready for war, but that doesn't mean that ultimately it will lead to war. That is my sense. And China has grabbed a lot of territory without firing a single shot. In South China Sea, they have been successful in capturing the Parcel Island, in capturing the Spratly Island, in capturing lot territory in South China Sea. So when China is succeeding in capturing the territory without firing the shot, so why they should committed the mistake of firing the shot against India? And already they are sitting comfortably at many places on line of actual control. So they have taken the proactive move, and now it is in fact India. Now India is pleading that for restoring our status quo ante, and I think the wise sense will prevail, and eventually China will go back to its upright position there. So my
So
feeling is that yeah, a time will
you
take
think
place, definitely.
it's all posturing? You think they are
Yes.
incapable of taking a war forward, and you think deployment of their brigade and in on the Indian side of the mountain brigade are is entire posturing, and this will all wind down without any action, is what your conclusion is?
So, in fact, it is a posturing. Posturing is from both the sides. India is also posturing. They are also posturing. As far as deployment is concerned, India has deployed its forces. China has deployed its forces. And right now, the status quo is in favor of China because it is the China who has occupied our territory, not the other way around. In Pangong, as you know, that they are sitting at this finger four. So finger 4 to finger 8 is the line of actual control. So their perception is that it is up to finger 4. So up to finger 4 they have already occupied. So 8 kilometers of region they have already occupied. So they are in advantageous position. So definitely they want the status quo should be maintained. But India is in favor of the status quo of April. So they are bargaining very hard for it, and I'm sure that as it happened in the Doklam and in other places also. So even in Doklam also they withdrew, but now the media report is coming. I don't know how much it can be trusted. That they did not build anything at the confrontation area, but in other area they have succeeded in creating some infrastructure for their military here.
And not
So
just
I
that, in
think.
Himachal Pradesh, in Uttaranchal, in Arunachal Pradesh, they have had a push all the way through. Today, the Indian Prime Minister went up to the
Yeah.
front line, to the front line, and has kind of shown us, that India is resolving and India is resolved to make sure that it will take the best action possible. It will be able to thwart the Chinese troops out. But there doesn't seem to be any movement on the Chinese side. There is a lot of posturing which is taking place. Will India be able to push them back or not? That's what we have to see. Dr. Tej, I'm going to thank you for joining
Rohit,
me.
just a minute, Rohit. This is not the first thing. Even if you go back in the history, in 1986, the Somdurungchu Valley incident happened, and even it took months to resolve this issue, and it led to the visit of Rajiv Gandhi to China. Then again, it happened in 2013, 14, 17. So there has been series of intrusions, and in all the intrusions, eventually the China has gone back. So the difference this time is that in place of one place, they have intruded at many places. So that is why lot of complication here. But my sense is that if China is not going back to its April positions, then definitely something is going to happen, and it also might lead to the war because India will be left with no option. Because if you are occupying its territory, and as Vietnam has accepted, as Malaysia, Indonesia, other countries has accepted this Chinese encroachment in their areas, the same kind of encroachment India will accept. As far as I feel, India should not be doing that. And I think when this talk will prolong and the hard bargaining will happen, you see that now India has started its offensive at diplomatic front also. The Hong Kong issue India never raised. Now they have raised that issue also. Taiwan issue India will be raising, and on every possible political and diplomatic front, India will be cornering China. So for China, it will be very difficult to deal with India also when China is at the firing range of all the countries, when the whole world has united against China. So I don't think that in this adverse situation, China will not try to resolve, and that too in an advantageous position, because China is losing nothing, not even a single inch. Simply they have to restore the status quo ante. So in future they again started because the border has not been resolved and China is not ready to resolve it. India is in
And
favor
I
of
don't think they
resolution of the
want to
war.
resolve it. Dr. Tej, we will leave it at that for today. Thank you for joining us. In
Okay.
concluding remarks, the war is very likely if both China does not move out and this continues going on in multiple places, then India will have no choice but to go for a full scale war. And India, at many levels, is ready for it. I don't think India is going to back out from a war if it has to fight a war. I think India has seen that a weakened position, a softened position, doesn't work for it. In terms of negotiations with India's neighbors, for example, looking at Nepal and looking at Sri Lanka and Maldives, India's negotiation as foreign affairs has been weak. India has not done enough outreach in making sure that it is able to communicate well with countries like Nepal, which have certainly fallen on China's side and have been pushing India on a border issue very close to all of these areas. So I think there is a larger challenge. India's outreach has to be aggressive. It has to be constant. India cannot be constantly tied up in its internal politics and dealing, and especially foreign affairs should not be left uh, on to just one individual, the prime minister. The foreign ministry needs to have enough of an outreach of its own, and it must go and interact with them. And there need to be people who are capable of interacting with other countries. The prime minister can't do it all the time. So I think it's a very, very odd situation for China and India. Both will suffer. There was a talk about the Asian century. The Asian century is not going to be for China and India. Both of them are going to be fighting a war and fighting a border war on an area that does not really mean much to both countries other than its ego and its honor. So they should both sit down in an ideal world scenario, have a resolution in who they are and how much space they need and how they can secure their interests and peacefully move on. When there is peace, there is growth. Both these countries are not in a position to not concentrate on growth, and they must. So, concluding remarks, thank you for joining us for this broadcast. We'll continue to bring issues of great value in foreign affairs and issues that matter to us as humanity. You're watching Democracy News Live on our social networks, on our web page, on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter channels. Continue watching us, and we'll be back with more.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.